There, everybody. I wanted to have this video up sooner for you, but the first time I recorded it, it felt kind of negative. The bottom line is I didn't really enjoy playing this deck too much, and I've had a lot of people ask me about it. As a content creator, it's kind of my prerogative to make a deck profile video on it. Having made top 8, I got 5th place, went 5-1 during Swiss at the Winter Clash event, and the only deck I lost to was Evil Shigaraki, piloted by my friend William Howard, who has put a ton of work into that deck. And conversely, this is a Hawks deck that I picked up from my friend Brandon Jones, and he even said it wasn't really going to be like my style of deck, and that's pretty true. So let's kind of jump into it. So overall, the Hawks deck here is kind of built around this interaction with Suited Up. The -1 from Hawks counts as a penalty, so even when the speed is modified and it's not a penalty, Hawks can give it a penalty, which will allow Suited Up to respond and give it another -1. So we get like an Eraserhead level of defense, right? Like how many characters on their face have -2 speed that are really... On top of that, you get the feathers, which are like another -2 speed when they first progressive in the card pool. And so Hawks as a character just has all kinds of speed control, and Suited Up leans into that really well. Suited Up also gives you damage pump when you really need it. So I think that on kill turns, I would commit Suited Up because doubling up my character's bonus seemed really good, but I think that there was more games where having the bonus damage on feathers, for example, would be really helpful. But we don't have a ton of damage pump from our stage. If you look at our stage, if you look at the foundations, it's almost all card draw. It's almost all speed control. There's a couple tech pieces like House of Cards to hate on momentum. We've got like card pool clearing, which counts as more hate. You know, the deck said at Clog Our Pool, we can't really affect that too often. So we got the one of, it's also a deadlock ability on it. That's really, the number 2 pro hero is speed hate and a tech piece. So there's just a lot of speed hate, really the big thing. Now, the training weights is something that I felt like I needed to kill any board state that wasn't completely devoid of defense. So if people were not overcommitting into me, and the game went really long, it really felt like training weights is what got us there. You know, being able to use all the feathers to ramp up the training weights with basically no risk of committing additional foundation, having a bunch of feather controls out to like cycle them, continue pumping up training weights with no real difficulty, and then playing 1 or 2 moves on our difficulty curve with max damage bonuses, like the way to go. So my main critique of this build is it's not proactive. Hawks is insanely good on defense, and you get 2 free mid block, right? You get 2 additional cards, which also help with speed hate. The order symbol is pretty good card draw, and I wish I'd been playing more passing the torch. I see a lot of builds play calling for backup, which makes a lot of sense when you have a 1 difficulty move to poke with. I couldn't find space for it here. In reality, I should have had a 4th tape, so that's something to pay attention to. But the overall breakdown of the deck is that you play insanely good defense, you have insanely good speed, and you wait for your opponent to either go to deadlock where you can be proactive, because we have a bunch of scaling offense. We have deadlock on so many of our cards, like Fruit of Our Labors punishes you in deadlock, Feather Control punishes you in deadlock. Think Fast gets better in deadlock when you can afford it, just like the training weights, right? Like that's kind of like our pre-deadlock training weight sometimes, where we can just overload a zone and get bonus stats. One of our only damage pumps here. Hero Killer, I actually got to use this deadlock. Someone thought it was an enhance they could cancel and got beat by the first form. Deadlock speed pump here. So yeah, so there's a ton of deadlock and a ton of cards that get better in deadlock. A ton of cards that are usable before deadlock, but until you have like 12 to 14 foundation itself, probably don't pop off super. And then the number one way I would change that is I would swap out these Vial Seizings for Electric Jolt. We already have so much deadlock in the deck that we're going to be showing deadlock in our stage, right? There's going to be deadlock in our discard pile. There's going to be deadlock in our stage. Even when I got to use the -2 to the checks, I wasn't playing that many attacks, right? The -2 to the check to block a Hawk's Feather doesn't really matter. People are still blocking that on a 3 most of the time. When you're blocking feathers, it means that you have an abundance of defense. You have an abundance of cards in hand, and you feel safe to block a feather. So it didn't matter for those. If it's a Blood Moon Rending turn, it probably doesn't matter if they get -2 to their check to block once or twice. Feather Sword Slash comes out before the Vial Season typically. So there's just a lot of times where my kill turns, which sounds really good, right? It sounds really good that my kill turns are like 3 attacks. They're realistically like dealing damage with Feather Sword Slash or 2 feathers for about 6 damage, and then I'm just absolutely dunking someone with one of my 5 diffs. So a lot of times people would block the 6/6 Feather Storm and go down to 1 or 2 foundations, immediately get punished by an indiscriminate or a focus attack string. And that felt really good, but it also feels bad that my opponent has to make that mistake. That makes sense, right? And if they just reduce the speed on Feather Storm instead of blocking it as a 6/6, they probably don't commit out. So we don't get that avenue opened. But other than that, the deck is just so solid defensively that you get time to play the game and you get to figure out if your opponent's going to give you that weakness or not. And you do risk kind of stalling the game out, but you're not in danger, right? The best thing about the deck is you never miss your window of opportunity. Because of that speed and damage swapping enhance, you can be very threatening with a lot of speed hate very quickly. So you can get pokes in really effectively. Your poke game is pretty nice, sending like 8 high for 4, sending, like people reduce the speed and you're like, okay, well now it's a 6 for 2. Do you really want to block that? Like your poke game is insanely good. If you could draw an abundance of feathers early, I held these too often. I didn't send these as pokes very often. Early in the tournament, people were just, using these as an excuse to breaker me for my build. So if I would go foundation, feather, they would breaker me. And I'm like, well, my 0 diff isn't guaranteed anymore. So it would give my opponent the chance to draw cards. I don't like that. So just like entering an enhanced step, you have to do it with purpose, which is another reason to play more passing the. So let's go kind of card by card real fast. I'm going to try to keep this under 10 minutes total. So Fierce Wings is pretty obvious. It picks up Showdown. Showdown is pretty obvious because we can switch the zone to high. I almost never did the once per turn unless it was to 0 out an attack. I use it as an additional block. The only time I ever used it for the zone change, once or twice when I had a Vial Seizing, or only when I wanted a Showdown to set up my kill turn. Suited Up, we already talked about. It's more speed hate and the damage pump you need. Training weights, we already talked. Feather Storm is an auto include, and I feel like the deck is too reliant on it. Spoiler alert, Jet Burn character doesn't function without their UR. Not that I needed it for kill turns, but if I wanted to attack someone who didn't overcommit, who was not willing to basically hand me the game on a silver platter, I needed a Feather Storm. It being weak to Seal, Flash, Faith Shield, so many things, flipping it face down was just really rough. Focus Attack is another deadlock set, and it's our main, I think it was our main kill card. People were like ready for Indiscriminate. Bumping this up to 3 might make more sense, especially if swap out the seasons for Jolts. Indiscriminate is incredibly good because people block your fast pokes, and you can use feathers to pump speed on it. I think I played a 23 damage Indiscriminate for like 11 speed because my opponent built 18 foundations, couldn't kill me, committed all of them in the process, and then we just had to play like 1 attack and dump all of our feathers in. So that was cool. Feather Sword Slash, it goes and gets the feathers. One thing you'll notice about this deck is I'm not playing Demeanor, and I'm not playing, there's one other card I think that dumps out feathers. But I'm only playing Feather Sword Slash is my only way to find feathers. I didn't like the 1/4, and I don't know, even in a 70 card deck like this, I was milling my feathers. I did not feel naked without them, and I never lost the game because I didn't have feathers. So I don't know. Maybe a one of relaxed demeanor is fine, but it was not for me. Vile Seizings should be jolts for this list specifically. Again, there's probably a world where the one high block breaker like feels really good, and it makes sense to have like the card draw cantrip for diff, but people were just paying for it. Just never fit, right? Like if you look at the way that the turn sequences work, it doesn't work very well with Blood Moon. It doesn't work if you draw a Featherstorm and a Blood Moon. It just doesn't combo focus attack. Like people, I don't know, people were committing out to draw this when it was a poke. It just seemed really obvious. There was no good way to conceal whether this was a poke seizing or a string seizing. And on top of that, it being 3 speed means that you have to have a speed activator to make this something that is not a free block. Did not particularly enjoy it, and I think it being a mid EX stun move that commits my rival's board would be way more important. I tried 3 of Blood Moon at one point because Blood Moon on a 5 sounds so much cooler than Blood Moon on a 6, but it was just a heavy investment attack. And again, with the Vile Seizings mixed in, I swapped out the 2 Blood Moons for more indiscriminate and another focus attack. And then for Feather, you got to have the Feather. New number 1 is incredibly good with Hawk's response. It means people can't just do all their speed enhances for free. Sometimes you get to, block on organic difficulty, but save these resources later. League Invitation is basically here to substitute for Jolts. Same thing with Proud Scion. We're very 3-diff heavy, and Brandon Jones called me a coward for not running more 3-diffs, and so I added these in last minute to kind of take in the place of Jolt, but they didn't really do what they needed to do. I would probably swap these out for more card draw, maybe keep a League Invitation or 2. The Proud Scion, as cool as the Deadlock is, no one is willingly going to Deadlock against you, and you shouldn't need this Deadlock ability. If you do, maybe side the Proud Scions, because it was effective in matchups where people were dependent on key foundations that Proud Scion hit. The Edge Shot deck I played against, I got to commit them out Lady Foundation. Means that if I made them block with all the cards in their hand, their character was effectively blank until they played an attack, which felt pretty good. Sticky Balls is an all-star, -5 speed is insane. Hacker Extraordinaire, because you need to hate on assets, and it counts as a little card draw. The Momentum Ramp, not super useful in this deck, but a good option. Take 5 damage, draw a card is solid, a solid ability. Incompatible Quirks is how we do our super late game strings. Probably worth bumping this up to a 2 of with cards like Training Weights and cards like Indiscriminate Shock in the number 2 Pro Hero. I would think I would have wanted more of this, but it really wasn't that big of a deal. It is a reason to take momentum in this deck, but it just, I don't know. It was surprisingly underwhelming when it should be an all-star for defense. Citywide Crisis, more speed control. Can't Escape Me. Every deck's trying to draw cards. Hero Killer is one of our only target foundation 8, but it's not as good as Jolt, so your mileage may vary. The Deadlock form is insane, so if you replace Vile Season with another weapon attack, I would definitely keep Hero Killer. If you replace it with a Jolt, you probably don't need Hero. Unexpected Hero is insane when you can swap speed and damage. Passing the Torch should probably be a 3 or a 4 of, just so I can poke with a Feather and get more out of it. Poke with a Feather, commit 3 foundations, draw 3 cards, build out. Super solid strategy, not one I got to pull off very often. So I just didn't see passing the torch very much in this. And having more passing the torches helps you see more passing. We're way over 10 minutes. Think Fast we already talked about. Feather Control should be obvious. House of Cards is our only momentum hate on the symbol, I think. So it's kind of something that you have to run. More Deadlock. Ice Gliding is insane rate, right? -3 speed on this one, -1 to the next one. You have another -1, then you're getting -3 speed on both attacks for effectively 2 activations. 1 Ice Gliding, 1 number 2 Pro Hero. That's -3 speed on 2 attacks. That's insanely good rate for Self-Sacrifice probably should have been more of in the deck. Not so much because I needed more low blocks. I think the block spread is fine, but just having more damage pump and more ways to fight people over the once per turn, right? If you set it to 0 damage, but they have more damage pump, you can fight over it better with self-stack. We just couldn't really find it. We were so this deck was so focused on being unkillable that self-sack being both good offensively and defensively kind of slipped through the cracks, I think. So self-sack has like a 2 of minimum, 3 of would feel really good probably. Tape should obviously be a 4 of. I just didn't have the 4th tape. I don't know what happened to it. I don't own like any set 1 cards. Set 1 commons are surprisingly hard to come by. And during set 1, I was trying to help get other people's their collections. I was trying to help other people build their collections. I don't actually own a tape. For gotcha, we needed low blocks, we need zeros. Surviving the final might have been the go-to, but I don't know. The zero situation is kind of weird. I really wish I had different zeros. Requesting didn't feel super good. Not surviving the final. I'm thinking of the evil build. What's the Desperate Times? Desperate Times might have been good here, but if you look at the block spread, we needed the low block. So you have 22 high blocks, 29 mids, and 18 lows. And so I think that's the main reason. Also, I mean, gotcha does work super good with training weights. There was plenty of times where Think Fast and training weights became defensive cards because I had gotcha out. And we didn't have a ton of stun hate. So while they didn't feel like super impactful most of the time, and I would have wanted more punishing, I guess, heroes, I do think gotcha is the right call, but I think requesting could be Desperate Times. I misspoke earlier. I said surviving the final. Desperate Times is the one where when your opponent draws a card, they have to commit a foundation. I think that combined with like a timely showdown is just like insane. So requesting is like super solid. Gives us another reason to have momentum. I think that's actually kind of a detriment to this deck. This deck functions so good without any real momentum. The only way I was using it was powerful 2 into ready training weight. And so if you've got the 4 gotcha, if you've got like synergy for training weight, spending momentum on it's not. And I only ever had like 1 or 2 momentum. That's probably where the deck can improve the most, actually, is on the zero diffs and Electric Jolt for the Vial season. But I'm really curious to see how Tim Keefe's list looks. I haven't actually looked at it yet. I wanted to do my deck profile and put it up so I didn't have like any tainted ideas. This whole profile would have just been like, yeah, just do what Tim Keefe did if it's, significantly different. I'm going to go check that out right now. You guys let me know down in the comments below what you think of the Hawks deck. What would you change? What were you surprised to see? Is there anything that was super shocking? I don't think so. I mean, you add 2 mid attacks to your hand every turn. We get to play focused attack, an order deck that puts speed on indiscriminate shock. Say it ain't so.